Hi, everyone, and welcome back to a very cool episode of the Parenting Reframe podcast. I am joined today by Emily Kay. Emily is here, and we're going to talk about motherhood. We're going to talk about balancing creative endeavors and what that means for moms in this modern world. So before I go on and on, Emily, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
I'm excited. So before we dive into the good stuff, not that this isn't good, but I want the audience to just know a little bit more about you. Like, who are you? I know we're both local Detroit moms, but tell me a little bit more about your journey and what you're currently doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. It's such a great honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Emily. I am a marketing professional and I'm a writer and I'm a blogger. I kind of wear a lot of different hats. My journey started, I would say, in Chicago. I got my undergraduate from Michigan State University, then moved to Chicago to get my master's degree in public relations and advertising. And while I got my degree there, I was working full-time in marketing, graduated, ended up getting a role at an advertising agency there where I was the first ever community manager. I actually had, when I was interviewing for the role, I had to look up what that meant because at the time, like Instagram wasn't even a thing for brands. And it was just such a different landscape with social media. And so in a lot of ways, I was kind of paving the way with social and content creation and digital marketing, which is a very cool role and place to be. And I worked there for about 5 years. I worked on different clients. One of our major clients was McDonald's. And so I headed up a lot of the content creation for the brand and eventually was recruited by the McDonald's digital team to go brand side. So I went on the client side and then managed all the agencies and content creation for them, which was such a cool role, honestly, like being on commercial shoots and different just creative shoots and productions was awesome. Got to meet like celebrities and, it was like the quintessential really, really cool job.
Yeah.
And learned so much from that. We ended up being in Chicago, my family and I, for about 10 years. My husband and I got engaged and then married, and then we had our first 2 babies there. Loved being in the city, but it was a lot to juggle family and working full time and just trying to live a family life in the city. We found was just there were a lot of just contextual hurdles around it. Like, you'd have to drive around the block for a half hour to find a parking spot with a screaming baby in the car and just, things like that is the reality of a city life. So we ended up, our families are from Metro Detroit. And so my husband and I and our 2 girls at the time moved back to Detroit. And then we've been here for about 5 years. And now we have 3 kids. I have my 2 girls and I have a boy. They're 8, 6, and 3. And then we actually have another on the way. It's our 4th and final baby. So we're going to have our hands full at home, but hearts will be full too. So a lot of juggling. But since I moved back to Detroit, I kind of dove into entrepreneurship. My husband and I have an interesting journey in that when we were in Chicago, I was working full time. I was the primary breadwinner. He was in entrepreneurship. He started a company of his own, did really well with that. And then when we came to Detroit, we kind of flipped. So I had an itch to go into entrepreneurship. He really was diving into consulting and kind of the more professional world outside of entrepreneurship. And so we kind of reversed our roles. So I became the entrepreneur. He kind of became like the stability of our income. And so I've been an entrepreneur now for about 5 years. And so what I do with entrepreneurship is I kind of wear a lot of different hats with it. I have my blog, which is called Isn't That Charming? There I do a lot of lifestyle content. And I also, under that umbrella of Isn't That Charming, I also do creative consulting where I do content creation and digital marketing for different brands. And I've worked with a lot of clients just on a freelance basis or project basis, which is wonderful because the tandem of the two means that I can juggle a family and just kind of like wear a lot of different hats. And then in addition to that, I'm also writing my first book. So I started my first novel about a year ago. We were talking earlier before we started recording that it's funny, I thought I would start this book process and it would take me like 3 months to write and I would have it done and then have it all buttoned up. And now it's like a year later and I'm still very much in the thick of it and learning throughout it all. So, kind of juggling a lot, but having fun along the way and also trying to be the best mom for my family.
Yeah, that's amazing, right? So many cool things though. And I think before we started recording, I was talking to you about the reason I'm bringing on like women like you, and previous episodes have had like Stephanie Steinberg from the Detroit Writing Room and Elizabeth Lewis from Detroit Moms, is I really want to help moms kind of see that you can give yourself permission to pursue these different endeavors, or if it's a creative pursuit, whatever it is, like you can be more than just the role of mother. And it's not that that isn't a beautiful role, and I'm sure you love it. I can just tell from following you for a minute that you are an exquisite mom. You would spend a lot of time with your kids. You do all these wonderful things, but then you're very much able to have these creative outlets too, which I think is so important. And I talk to so many mothers when I'm coaching who are really like riddled with self-guilt and just blame, and they just, anytime they want to do something, they feel bad about doing it, so then they're not even enjoying it while it's happening. And so I wanted to really highlight stories like yours where we can strike that balance. We can give ourselves permission to do those things. So kind of in that vein of like, how do we kind of move into these spaces? What has been challenging in terms of being a mom of 3 young kids, now almost 4, which is so exciting. Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. God, everything's been challenging.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, I think there's always, in life, there's always adjustments, right? Like when I was a full-time working mom, there was the adjustment of wearing the hat of being like going to work and being all in as a working professional, and then going home and trying to spend my time as a mom and trying to be the best mom possible despite working full time. And, you know, I think there is a great balance where you can strike both. Equally, there's been a lot of challenges with going to entrepreneurship and, you know, really trying to juggle like my personal time and trying to be all that I can for my children, but also like feeling the guilt that comes with, well, I'm not bringing in as much income, and therefore should I not be spending as much time on some of these other endeavors? And there's always kind of just an adjustment of expectations and perceptions that I have to keep myself in check with, which is, you know, like sometimes this strive for perfection, I think, gets in our way. Like you could always be doing more in whatever realm you're referring to, whether it be motherhood or career or entrepreneurship or whatever it is. And I think for me, it's been the adjustment of expectations of like, today, this is good enough. Like you know, my kids are at summer camp. I don't feel guilty about that. They are happy. They are healthy. They're having fun. I get 3 hours in the morning to do what I need to do. And then when I pick them up, I gotta swipe the expectation for doing a lot for my career while I'm with them, because it's impossible to do it all. So, you know, it's kind of like the adjustment even on a daily basis, on an hourly basis of like, where are your efforts focused and how can you best just like be in the moment and know that like your efforts, even if you're not getting paid through just the work of mothership, it's still very meaningful and you're still making a difference. And I think that for me has been like the biggest challenges, going from like being a large income driver to then entrepreneurship, where I'm not bringing in as much, but still feeling like I am bringing value. And that was a hard adjustment for me, and just like level setting my expectations of every single day. Like what can I do today? What can be good enough for me in that career moment? And what do I need to just adjust my expectations for, on not trying to put too much pressure on myself in any one place, I think is really big with motherhood.
I love that. Yeah, I agree with you. I wrote an article, it was a while back, and it was funny. One of my first articles that really resonated, and it was this idea of rebalance. And so I think that title, or just balance, the word in general, can sometimes be like, it's impossible, or it feels like this elusive state that some people achieve, but certainly not us, you know? And so I wrote about this idea of like, balance is a daily practice, right? We have to every day check in and say to ourselves, what do I need today? And a lot of like what you're saying, how do you kind of set those intentional times aside so that that's really like the priority is my kids during this next chunk of time. And then after that, it's really about me and how I can take care of myself. And then after that, it might be, you know, time with your spouse or just whatever it might be. And some days balance might look like, I just have to take a shower today. Like,
totally.
Right? Like giving yourself permission that it's not going to look the exact same. And exactly what you're saying, that expectation of like how it's supposed to be, I think is what gets us into the most trouble, right? It's, you know, I'll work with parents who will say, you know, my child is having all these challenging behaviors and will be in public and I know I'm being judged. And almost always what's happening is that we are setting this false expectation on ourselves that our kids are supposed to be calm, cooperative, and perfect. And when they're not, it is like a direct assault of how we're parenting. And then we feel the burden of that. And then what happens is we end up either having reactive responses toward our kids or toward our partners or whatever the case is. And we're just in this stew of shame, really. So it's just really about taking that time to check in and say, like, what do I need today? And sometimes it is, today I don't need to do very much. I can just tell that I'm needing to rest. Or today my whole day needs to just be about like hanging with the kids. Or today my whole day needs to be about being at peace that the kids are with somebody else and I'm doing what I need to do.
Yes. I love that so much because I think as moms, as working professionals, we put so many expectations on ourselves. And what I have found throughout the years and throughout 3 kids and now almost a 4th is that most, if not all of my most stressful times, particularly in relation to motherhood, have been my own expectations that I placed on myself that I didn't meet. Yeah. Whether it be, to your point, like my kids' behavior or, you know, an expectation of the day that I didn't meet, or, you know, there's always something that, like, if you're a high achiever, you have high expectations for yourself. And so if you don't meet those, you feel disappointed, you feel frustrated, you feel overwhelmed, and then you're more likely to like yell or, you know, and I have found that when I just take a step back and I alleviate some of the pressure from myself, I become a happier person, a better mom, a more patient person across the board, both to myself and to my kids. And my expectations are no longer like up here, they're just more manageable. And some days every day it looks different. It's just like figuring out the right balance for that day based on the context of the situation.
For sure. I'm reading right now, I'm almost done with it. It's called On Our Best Behaviour, The 7 Deadly Sins and the Price Women Pay to Be Good. It's by Elise Loehnen, who's like one of my absolute favorite authors and podcasters. And long story short, she breaks it down into like the 7 deadly sins. It's not really a religious book, but it just kind of shows how that thinking and that programming has really conditioned women throughout the years. And so sloth is one of them. And that's that idea of like our value is rooted in our productivity and how productive we deem ourselves to be.
I do that so much.
Right? Like I was thinking about this, like if I take a day where I'm just being idle or I'm not really, don't have a lot on my calendar, it kind of, I struggle. Like I'm like, this is wasting time or, you know, I'm not doing enough. And it's because a lot of my own self-worth can sometimes be tethered to that idea of like, how much did I get done? How many check marks were put on my to-do list, you know? And so kind of reframing that a little bit so that we're not, you know, using this weird metric to determine, you know, how valuable or how good we're doing and sort of letting go of that a little bit. And I'd imagine as somebody who has a lot of creative pursuits, like you write, and you're a beautiful writer, by the way. Like I feel like you need to know that because I started off just reading your work before I even went into like the lifestyle piece. You have fantastic input on that too. But you're a really great writer. And I can't wait, you know, to talk to you a little bit more about your book, but you really can communicate in a really genuine way through your writing, and I think that's awesome. So when
that means so much.
Oh my gosh, totally. So when you are kind of pursuing different creative endeavors, how does that feel? Because what I'm finding myself is as I'm in this sort of space that where I create something, I don't really know how it's going to work or if it will land or if it won't. It's hard because you don't know the outcome, you know, like how do you, isn't that so hard? So how do you sort of reconcile or how do you work through that? Do you get better and better at it? Do you sort of build like creative muscle as you go?
Yeah. I mean, I think that as with anything creative focused, being patient with yourself and just doing it. Like there's that famous Teddy Roosevelt quote about being in the arena. And I'm like full-heartedly, especially with creative endeavors, believe in being in the arena, like being in there and not looking from the outside and like critiquing all the work that you see, but just being in there and immersed and doing it and being like, you know, the one who's fighting and who's just trying and trying and trying. But, and if you fail, you fail, but at least you are in there and you're doing it and you're learning. And I really believe in that mentality of like, if you have an idea, a creative pursuit, whether it's something that you monetize or not, just going forward, taking the step to have the idea and then being like, I'm going to pursue this. if it's not a skill I know, I'm going to learn it. If it is a skill I know, I'm going to practice it. I'm going to do it until I get better. And I would say that like throughout my career, just being in a creative focused career with advertising and then being in digital marketing, that really helped me because I was able to learn tactical skill sets through photography and copywriting and what are the different types of copywriting. Like my background is in journalism from undergrad. So between that and then like writing for public relations minded things or advertising minded things, there's different styles of writing, but just doing it, living it, breathing it day in and day out, being in the arena, like helped me get better and learn. Likewise, starting the blog, I kind of had this itch for doing more lifestyle things while I was at the advertising agency. I was doing very like food focused things, but I wanted to write more about like home and style. And just even reflections on life. And so when I first started my blog, it was terrible. It was the worst. I'm like so embarrassed looking back at some of my posts and being like, I can't believe I put that out there. But I was in the arena. I was like showing up and I was learning day after day. And then, years later, it's kind of like you find your voice. You practice photography enough to know like what lighting works, what doesn't, what colors are you editing, like how is your editing process, like what works for your voice and your writing. And when you're wearing different writing hats, whether it be from a digital marketing perspective for a brand or for myself as creating my own brand or now writing a book, like what are those different like mentalities and zones you have to get into? Because I think especially when you're writing, it's a very individualized and creative process that's contextual for the self. Like for me, I cannot just sit down and bust out something in 10 minutes. Like I have to like have my music on and my area around me, my visual area needs to be clean. I have to like write for an hour and get in the zone and then I'll find this like flow where I'm just like, but I can't get there without my like little process. Yeah. And I've learned that over time, which honestly, it's like both a help and a hindrance because on one hand, like I know what it takes to get into that zone. But on the other hand, if I don't have that setup, I think I can limit myself from like, oh, well, I don't have that time today to get into it. So I'm going to do something else. And sometimes that like anti-productivity can be a hindrance too. So anyway, that was just a long way of going about saying like, I think it's for the creative process, especially when you're kind of someone who like me, like is very fueled by ideas and wants to explore different ideas. It's just getting out there and trying and knowing that you're not going to be very good at first, but you're going to get better. And the only way to get better is to just show up and do it. And also I think there's a level of courage that and not being afraid to fail that you have to have, because especially if you're showing up in a space that's public, you just have to have it takes a lot of heart because there's always going to be a critic. You just have to like just show up and be like unapologetically, this is who I am, this is how I'm showing up, and it's okay to fail. And guess what? It's also okay to pivot, change your mind. Like all those things are okay, but at least you're showing up.
Yeah, gosh, I love that so much. And it resonates with me so much because it is true. When I first started, it was like terrifying to like write something, publish it, and then kind of just let it be and not really know if it's good or not good. And the way we sort of critique ourselves and police ourselves, I mean, I'm still sort of undoing a lot of that myself, but I will say that the process has been so incredibly fulfilling. And I've learned so much about myself, about where a lot of those insidious fears are that are governing so much of my decisions and how I've really been able to work through that. And it's only been through the creative process. I think when we work in a 9-to-5 or when we have some structure in our lives that feels predictable and safe, though we know after COVID certainly that nothing is really certain and predictable. But when we tell ourselves that, I think we can become very sort of, I don't know what the right word would be, but like we just go through the motions and we're just very aware of like what comes next, what's after that. And there isn't a lot of room for growing and learning and really seeing ourselves in these different lenses and recognizing different things about ourselves. So that's probably what I've loved the most. And then the other piece of it too is like, you're right. You look back and you're like, what was I even thinking about when I wrote that article or whatever? Yeah, the cases. But then there is something gratifying about like looking back at the beginning and then going all the way to present and seeing that progression of like, for myself at least, like when I can see like an article that I really loved or that I wrote that, I was like, I wouldn't have been able to write that had I not written those first 10 really bad ones, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And the only way out is through, right?
That's
like the only way to that point where you get good is being bad at one
That's
point
right.
and like just not, I don't even want to say bad, being green,
Yes,
being
learning,
fresh learning, starting off, like everyone's got to start somewhere. And especially if it's a newer endeavor, like that's been one of my biggest takeaways from it. And I think there's also like, for me, one of the things I'm learning about the creative process is like, for me, structure is really helpful. Like I actually really thrived in like the 9-to-5 creative world because the stability was helpful for me. The structure was helpful for me. And I did that while being a mother, while blogging. So I had a lot on my plate. So I was also in entrepreneurship while doing, the 9-to-5 thing. But I think for me, that structure, the predictability of like these from 9 to 5, I'm here. 5 to 7 until my daughter goes to bed, I'm here. And then from 7 to 9, I'm here. Did that leave a lot of room for like personal balance? No. Which is what I think like being in entrepreneurship has helped me just find the personal balance as I've had more kids and just life has changed. But I think the ability to juggle those hats and finding what that sweet spot is for you, whether it be the stability and then doing something as a side project or making that side project your thing and then maybe having something on the side that you have as more stability, like whatever that balance is. Again, I think that's where the flexibility is really helpful. And I just going back to your journey, because we talked when you were first starting off and it has been so cool to watch you in your journey and how you've grown and like truly it's been amazing to see. And just even with the podcast and you're growing on social and you've written articles, like you've helped me so much with parenting from your content. And it's just really cool to use an analogy to watch like a flower blossom. Like you are just really thriving in it. And I just have to applaud you because it's truly been so cool to watch you just grow and immerse yourself in the journey and how far you've come too.
Thank you so much. That really means a lot. And you were so kind to talk to me when I was like just about to start. And I was like, I don't even know if what I'm doing makes sense. Like there was so much kind of brewing in my head about like, don't do it. What are you thinking? You're fine. Just go to work every day and stop with this whole, whatever it is that you're thinking about. And it is easy to talk yourself out of some of those things that make you feel vulnerable. Totally. But I stand on the shoulders of people like you who really took me under your wing and gave me advice and spent time really generously and kindly walking me through like, don't worry, just try, and just get in there and start working on it and see where it leads you. So there was a little bit of a surrender that has to take place, right, in those creative processes. But watching people like you, it really, and I still say this, like I'm in awe of the fact that like you can have an idea, a thought that, hey, I should try this, and that you just give yourself that permission to do it, right? Because we all know as mothers, there's 1,000 reasons to say no, right? You're pregnant with your fourth. Clearly, you don't have to even say more than that. You're very busy, right? You have a full home. You have
my head's about to fall off.
That's right. You have so much going on. If you're anything like me, I felt terrible when I was pregnant. So like the fact that you still can say, yes, I have all of this, but I matter. My voice matters. My ideas matter. I think that's like such an important takeaway for so many women to really absorb, right? You're very welcome. And it's very true. And we need more of that, right? There's a lot of policing of each other where we'll kind of feel some envy or jealousy if somebody's out there and really doing fantastic work and really growing a following or an audience. And, we need to applaud that and celebrate that, because every time you do that, it opens a door for me to do that too, instead of it being like a scarcity mindset. So I think like for me, we need each other in this process.
Yes, I'm such a believer in that. And I'm such a believer in just working together and helping people along the way. And also just leaning on people who are just not being afraid like you were to reach out and be like, hey, can I pick your brain? Like we can learn so much from each other. And I just don't believe in this whole like competitive women thing. It's like we all have our unique battles. We all have our unique stories. I am so fortunate to be in the position of exploring my book and entrepreneurship and being a mother at the same time. I know that is a extremely privileged and blessed position. And but I also have a lot of experience with a lot of different types of journeys where I was the full-time breadwinner whose head was about to fall off and like was trying to do all that too. Like, so I think just recognizing that we all have our unique journeys and can share those lessons learned and be cheerleaders for one another, it helps all of us. It's not a competition. It's the good of one is the good of the whole.
I love that. I totally agree with you too. So with that, can we talk for a minute about social media?
Yeah.
Right. So you have a great following. You're great on there. But I noticed that you'll say sometimes like, I'm taking breaks or I'm not going to come on for a little while. So how do you kind of strike that balance, and where does that live in terms of like your everyday life as you're balancing like writing a book and different creative endeavors and freelance jobs you might be doing, and then being a mom and a partner and all these other things? Where does social media sort of get in the way, and where is it really helpful?
I'll say it gets in the way more than it's helpful.
Okay.
And I say that really believing in social media. I believe in the good of it. I believe in the creative outlet. I think it's empowered so many women and just people in general to be entrepreneurs. There is so much good in social media.
Yeah.
I also, being at the forefront of social media, like literally meeting with Instagram, the team of Instagram, helping to shape some of the first ads, like was on the ground level because of my role in the advertising agency and on client side. I really got to see firsthand how consuming can be. And when you're on social media and you're creating content for it, you're kind of always on a treadmill. You create this piece of content, you put it live, and then it's kind of like, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And it can be exhausting. Yeah. It can be exhausting to create content for. It can be exhausting to consume. And I do have I love it. I don't want it necessarily to go away. I have a healthy skepticism of it in terms of my daily life and interactions with it. And I think that's something that's developed over time. I used to, for example, share a lot of our daily lives, and that included a lot of our kids. And I had like some scary situations where like someone stole an image of my daughter. I had like things that like I was kind of the guinea pig learning throughout it all. Didn't think it was that big of a deal. Yeah. And then all of a sudden something happens and you're like, oh, that I'm not comfortable with this. So it was like a lot of like just learning as I went along and kind of like growing up, so to speak, in the era of social media and being on the brand side, but the personal brand side, and also sharing my personal life. There was like, I saw it was such a double-edged sword. And so for me, I just learned to like really put strict boundaries around it. Like I have a personal account that's like only close friends and family that I'll share my kids on occasionally, but my public profile on Instagram, like I don't really, other than like maybe the occasional like back of my kids' heads or something, I just don't really share them much because I'm just not comfortable with it anymore. And that's not to knock anyone who does. It's everyone has their own personal comfort zone. It just, my comfort zone was not, I wanted to kind of like shield them from it a bit more. I also found that the more I had my phone out around my kids, the more distracted I was, the less patient I was as a mom. I didn't think I was teaching them the right, like what to prioritize in your everyday attention span, which me in front of my phone, interacting with them is not really interacting with them. So I made it my personal challenge to like, when I'm with them, I try to really put down my phone, and I'm with my kids a lot. So therefore I don't have my phone a lot. And so I've learned to really compartmentalize social media. I look at it, especially like public accounts, I look at it as more of like marketing tools. And to me, that there's a healthy level of like being on and present and doing your best to create content and like growing your audience and being, engaging and all those things. But also like, what are your personal boundaries? Like for me, it's turning off, and I will definitely find myself like kind of getting caught up in it. And then I have to be like, okay, I'm going to have a break. And sometimes that break is for a day. And sometimes I'm loving that break so much, like 2 weeks will go by and I will try, I'm just like, oh, well, I just try not to put too much pressure on it, but I also try to like have a healthy mental balance with it. Cause I've just been a part of the personal unhealthiness of it. And I've personally like, for my sake, my mental health sake, my kids' sake, I found that it's better for me just to have that boundaries and balance. And it literally I give myself permission for that to change by the day. Like I just, I'm pretty unapologetic about it. And so, I don't know, that's my perspective. And
no, I love it.
May not be for everyone, but
well, no, I think everyone's got to find their way. Right. And certainly I think we're all having this conversation now of like, how much are we consuming? How much time are we spending on there? And so it's funny because I never had social media. I'm 43 going on 44, and I didn't get it until I think I was 38 or 39. And honestly, I think it was like right pre-pandemic, because like I just started to dabble in it. And I think it was because I started to write, and I was like, well, if I want to write and I want to share articles and I want to have an audience, I think I have to grow an audience. Like I think I'm supposed to find people. Yeah. And so that's what prompted me to do it. And it's been interesting to take it in as an adult who is kind of comfortable in my own skin at this point, has lived enough years of experience that I'm not like tethered to it, or really like I don't put a lot of weight in what's happening, you know, in terms of likes and follows and things like that. But I can see how insidious it is if you really lose any sense of like, if your whole self and identity starts to be wrapped in like who you are on social media, it can be so
it's easy to do.
Yes, it can be so consuming. So it's interesting. And like for the kid point, you're not alone. I've talked to a lot of people who are like, I just don't feel comfortable showing pictures of my kids. And it is sort of this, I can see both arguments, right? And I can see both positions. Totally. So you got to just really do what's right for you and what feels best. You know, I'm at the advantage that my kids are older. So I just ask their permission. And if they want me to show them, they don't, you know, like my son, for instance, doesn't care at all. He's 20. My daughter's 17. She doesn't want me to. So like if I ever post her, there's been like a full permission. She's looked at the post. She's read every word before I put it up there, and she's given it the green light, or she's helped me create it. So I'm mindful of the fact that they both have very different thoughts on their, you know, position on social media and what that means. And I have to be respectful of that too. But it is a really interesting time. You know, and it's funny, like a friend of mine said to me, I think like a year ago, you should start doing videos on TikTok, because I really just like teaching on the different ideas of parenting, reframing different parenting concepts, trying to help parents with like just tangible tools or ways they can maybe shift and see things a little differently. And I wasn't really interested in like sharing a ton about myself. It's not that I'm not hiding anything. I just don't have anything that cool to show. Like I'm really not doing very much every day. So she said, you should go on TikTok and just do videos. And I was like, oh my gosh, that just feels like I have to learn a whole new thing. My bandwidth isn't there right now. And so reluctantly, after a little bit, I did it. And I've loved it. For part of the reason is that
you're great on TikTok.
Thank you
You're
so
one
much.
of my favorite follows on TikTok.
I appreciate that. So the reason I like it is because I can just go on, teach. I don't have to make it pretty.
Yes,
there is
it's
no
less pressure.
That's right. It's not edited. It isn't manicured into this perfectly beautiful reel that, you know, I'm just a talking head, and that's perfectly fine for me. And it seems to be resonating and working. So it's just interesting how each platform, even though I was very reluctant, now I'm very comfortable on TikTok, because there isn't really this pressure to be like, and today I went here for breakfast and I'm going here on vacation. Yeah. Like I don't have to. They don't care.
You have like a strong niche, right. So you can like go into that world, and then you can step out and not think about it, which is really, it's powerful, especially with social media.
That's been nice.
And I think too, it's like, for me, it's been kind of trying to gauge like, so it's interesting because hearing you talk about the benefits of TikTok is one of the things I really struggle with social. I really struggle with just showing up as I am and not like, if it's an in-feed post, I'm like, okay, like my background is in advertising. So everything was like professional, buttoned up, like, you know, that was how I learned to create content. And that certainly has its value. Sure. However, the platforms have evolved and people want more messy. People want, you know, just the quick, hey, how's it going? Like most influencers I follow are very much not necessarily like thinking of it in a buttoned up content perspective. It's just like, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm sharing it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Whereas for me, I'm like, I have a really hard time putting on that hat for some reason. I'll come on stories and say, you know, be like, hey, blah, blah, blah. But even that for me, I'm kind of like, okay, like what's the like I just I can't get out of that mind frame of like the advertising zone, right? Yeah. So I think it's just finding what your balance is and what platforms you feel comfortable on, and then leaning into that, because the truth is like there's so many and there will always be so many. Yeah. And the hard part about the platforms is they all come and go. Like look at Vine. I know. You know, and some get more popular, some get less, some are more popular with certain generations, some are less. But, you know, it's just like you can, no matter what platform you're talking about with social media, it's a driver for content and it will resonate with certain people. It will not with others. And so you just have to find, to your point, like what works for you and kind of learn along the way. You know, it's just, it's funny because there's not a one size fits all, certainly for any one person.
No, I totally agree. I know like my email list has grown so much since I started, and it's been fantastic because I always tell people, if you really want to be like in the circle and listening to the things I'm sharing, get on my email list because I share so much more in that context. Because to me, that feels more community-like.
Yeah.
You've signed up for a reason. Certainly, maybe what I'm saying might be resonating. I share more in my newsletters. So I started a Substack and we'll kind of see where that goes. But I'd almost like to get it to a point where I could just post videos there or do like open coaching sessions there.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And put it in some kind of a community where even observers and consumers of the content feel safe enough to ask a question or, so it's interesting, like all the different ways we can kind of think about how we want to grow it and shift and change it. So, but it's been a learning process.
I think that's really smart too, because I think that's one of those avenues that you own, right?
Yes.
Like if TikTok went away tomorrow, you still own your email list.
Yes.
That's how I feel about my blog. Like I'll never get rid of my blog because no matter what social media platforms I'm leaning into at that moment or plugging and playing with, I own my content on my blog. I own the site.
Yeah.
Like I think it's really smart to think of it as almost like a hub and not to put like too much digital marketing out there into the conversation, but like a hub and spoke. Like if you think about it, like what's your hub? Where's like the nuts and bolts of like the key benefits and value adds that you're providing for your audience and how can you drive people there?
Yes.
Those are your spokes, right? So TikTok is your spoke. It's driving people to your email list, but you are driving your email list, you're growing it. And that's really, really where the heart and soul of your value is going to continue to grow in addition to social media, but that's kind of like, it's what you own, right? So that's like, it's the most powerful, I would say.
No, I totally agree with you. And like I said, there is a different trust with my email subscribers and a different type of disclosure that I am more comfortable sharing and doing. So it's been a real awesome process for sure. So with that, are you comfortable kind of sharing a little bit about your book or is it under wraps surprise? Yeah. Okay. We're both.
No,
I was telling you a little bit too that I'm about to start writing my book. And so
I know that's so exciting.
Talking about the writing process and it's we could do a whole podcast on the writing process.
Oh my God.
But tell us
It is a beast.
It is a beast. I know. And you're alone a lot. And I think people there is a lot of I think it looks so cool. Like, oh, I write a book or I'm a writer. Like somebody said to me, like, you're like Carrie Bradshaw. I'm like, I'm not like Carrie Bradshaw. Like nothing about the writing process looks super glamorous.
Yeah, most is like your hair is like up in a bun and you're like
isolated in my room.
A gremlin.
Away,
yes, exactly.
Once in a while, I push myself out to a coffee shop and we might
get, you're lucky.
Exactly. So yeah, it's not quite that glamorous, but it is a really interesting process in terms of like, really doing that internal work, that some of the things that we've been talking about. So tell me a little bit about your process. How are you even carving out time?
Oh my God, I'm like not. I'm trying my best. That's basically what I can say about it.
Yeah, it's so hard.
It's okay. So we talked a little before we started recording about Elizabeth Gilbert, who I love. I adore Elizabeth Gilbert. And she has this book called Big Magic, which talks about ideas and how she believes that ideas are this living, breathing thing. Yes. And I feel like my book idea really came to me as a living, breathing idea. It was in the midst of COVID. I had quit my role, my full-time marketing role, about a year and a half prior. And that was to dive into entrepreneurship. I was very focused on my blog and creative consulting. I was just kind of doing those two. And then COVID hit and my son was born the first day of lockdown. Wow. Threw me through a whole loop. Like it was just such a wild time as it was for so many people. And I was home full-time mothering, scared to go to even the playground with my children. And I was trying to juggle all these different hats, failing at everything. Like it was just so hard. And it was this really big realization for me of motherhood and how unsung mothers are as heroes. Yes. Like we are unsung heroes. The amount of work we do day in and day out, that's very much thankless. Most of the time you don't even notice that we're doing it because it's just the baseline. Like it was just this huge eye-opening moment for me. And I was kind of in that zone for a long time because I had a newborn at home. We didn't know how COVID would affect newborns. Our doctor's direction was like, you are in lockdown. So for 3 months, we saw no one. I mean, I was totally isolated with my family. And then we would just see like just close friends and family. But that like world of piecing it together, hybrid learning, digital learning, like it was just so hard to juggle a family, 2 toddlers, one who was starting kindergarten, a newborn. It was just so much. For like 2 years, it was in this weird gray zone. Long story short, this idea came to me that was basically, the idea is about a superhero. And there's a girl who becomes a superhuman. She has superhuman abilities. And but the story is from her mother's perspective. And so it's a women's fiction novel. And I really believe in the idea. I believe in the themes I'm exploring. It's been so much fun to write.
Yeah.
It's evolved as I've written. I will say it's been the most intense and hardest creative process I've ever been through. I thought I would start this book. I started it in 2021, early 2021. And then actually it was more, I kind of put the idea to kind of together. I started reading books about like the craft of writing and how to write a novel and started doing my research. And then I would say I was seriously started to explore writing the book mid 2021, and I've been working on it ever since. And I thought I would be able to write it in like 3 months. It's now 2023 and I'm still in the thick of it. But what I didn't realize that was so vital as a part of the process is to the point of what we were talking about earlier, where like you're in the arena and sometimes you're just starting as green and you just got to go after it. I didn't know how to write a book.
Yeah.
I had done all these different writing ventures. I had written long form white papers for brands. I had written short form copywriting. I'd written blog, like all these different types of content I had written and felt like I was a professional and very good at, but I had never written a book, and a fiction book at that. And so, you know, how do you develop a character? How do you establish world building? What is a proper story structure? How do you ensure that dialogue is coming across properly? And how do you ensure it's good dialogue and meaningful and driving the story forward? And you know, there's so many elements to writing a book. And so I feel like in many ways it's taking 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And then the project in and of itself is very much like that. But then when you also add on motherhood and trying to piece together some of these creative consulting clients and the blog where I can't, it's just like, it's been a lot of hats to juggle. And what I've really learned about the process for me is, again, just patience. And like, maybe it won't be in my timeline. Like I didn't finish it in 3 months. I'm still working on it now. My goal is to finish it. I don't know when that'll be. I hope it's sooner rather than later. I'm making good progress. Is it good? Who the heck knows? I might be the only one who reads my own book. But my goal is just to finish it and to have it be good. I would really love for it to be a great book. But I think also like I've also read through following other writers and just through learning more about the process that like, excuse my language, but a shitty first draft is better than no first draft at all. And I've had to really remember that because I've tried to I've noticed myself getting into these rabbit holes of like, okay, I need to perfect this one scene before I move on to the next. And I'll work on it for like a week. And like 5,000 words in, I'm like, I have to just move forward. Like I can't keep ruminating on this one dialogue section. And, you know, it's just, I think it's a process where I'm learning that like, again, like done is better than perfect. Just finishing it is super important because it's going to change in the editing process anyway. And I'm learning as I go. So I probably will have an actual shitty first draft, but hopefully through editing and beta readers and going through the process, like it'll get better and better until my final result will be good, hopefully, right? That's the goal.
For sure. No, I love that. And I think I completely agree with you in that you have to get through that. It's the same thing we were talking about earlier, right? Like you have to do the bad stuff so you can get to the good stuff, right? I know Seth Godin always talks a lot about that too. Like just ship the work and then you're going to get better and better at like putting something out there, getting it out there, and then looking at it and going, where can it get better? Where can I improve? But if you're not going to do those steps and you're not going to kind of walk through that process, you're just going to stay stuck, right? Most of the time. So I know, so it can be definitely an arduous process, but I'm excited. So you're going to have to come back when the book comes out and we'll talk more about what that process, kind of how it finished and what it went through. But I'm excited for you because I think there is something exciting about putting a fiction story all together. Like we were talking a little bit about this because my book will be nonfiction. Maybe one day I will write a fiction book, but I don't know. For right now, nonfiction sounds like already more than enough. But I think, you know, when you're in a fictional writing state, I think there has to be some sense of like allowing those ideas to come and evolve and not really constantly controlling it, but just kind of wondering like that feels right. This doesn't feel right. That there's a lot of intuitiveness to it, I think. So I think that process is probably pretty fun. I'd be very curious about it for sure. Yeah.
Well, and it's also like, to your point about the evolution of it, like it has changed so much. Like the nuts and bolts of the premise are the same since when it first started, but the story itself has changed. The characters have changed. Like almost every single element about the story has changed besides like the general premise.
Yeah.
Like, and so I think it's giving yourself that flexibility to like maneuver and pivot as different ideas come to you, or as you explore one idea and it didn't work out how you thought. And so for me, there's been a lot of writing that I have retracted. Like and I would never like throw it away, but I have a draft folder of scenes that are like, it's like so long, and it's like, that's okay, because those will probably never see the light of day, but they helped me get to a better place of the next scene that hopefully will work. So yeah, it's just kind of like allowing that process to naturally evolve and unfold and grow how it's supposed to.
I love that. No, it's so good. All right. So one final question that I always like to ask is, what do you hope in 20 years that your kids know about you? Like outside of just being a mom, like what do you want them to really know about who you are?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I hope they know that I want them to know that I tried to be brave.
Yeah.
I want them to know that I really put my best foot forward in believing in myself and believing in them, even when answers weren't clear, and that in life, I just tried to be brave in whatever those endeavors may be, whether it be motherhood or personal endeavors. I just, I believe in getting out there and doing it and trying, and I hope they do the same in life.
Oh, I love that. And what an important lesson. And we need more brave moms, right? We need our daughters to see it's okay. We need our sons to cheer brave women on. And so I love that. I think that's a perfect answer, Emily. So thank you so much for being here. You're definitely going to come back when the book comes out. And
thank you.
Thank you.
5 years. No. Hopefully it'll be in a few months.
Oh my goodness. Yes, it will be sooner than 5 years. We'll put that out there.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm right there with you. But the process does take long. And especially if you move into like, depending on how it gets published, that can be a whole other set of years on top
of it. That's like a beast. I've done a lot of exploration and like, what are the next steps after I have my manuscript done? But like, that is a whole other area that I'm just like, I gotta keep my blinders on and just like, just
one step at a time, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Okay, Emily, this is so wonderful talking with you. I could talk to you forever. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Well, until next time. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever it is that you're listening right now. And what really makes my day is if you share or recommend the podcast to a friend. It is the greatest compliment. If you have not already, head on over to theparentingreframe.com where you can subscribe to get my weekly newsletter, Parenting Skimmed. 10 sentences delivered to your inbox every Thursday to help you parent and live a better life. It's for the parent who constantly told me, I just don't have time to read. Make sure to come and say hi to me on Instagram at The Parenting Reframe. My DMs are always open and I love hearing from you. Until next time, this is Albiona.